Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Episode 21 of Birth of the Middle Ages. Crazy to think it's already been 21 episodes. It's technically been 23. 23 episodes. Because we had that little break in between, in the middle, where we read a little bit of En route. But we're back. We're back with Birth of the Middle Ages. It's been since Friday. Hopefully we get a little bit more read today than we did on Friday and Wednesday. But we'll see. We'll see. We're still talking about the Franks, the rise of the Frankish Empire, specifically getting a little bit into Charlemagne. We were talking a little bit more about his father, Pippin. But once we finish this chapter, which we've only got a few pages left of it, we'll get kind of more into Charlemagne, I believe. But it should be a good chapter. The rest of the chapter should be good. The first part of the chapter was good. I enjoyed it. It's just more interesting. Frankish history is just interesting to me. I love it. It's a lot more interesting than Arabian history and the Islamic history. That was just boring. This is real. This is real good stuff. I think we'll give it a second, see if anybody else shows up. I doubt it. We have our resident 2. We're sitting good at 2 people. So we'll if we can get more than that, cool. If not, this is normal. So how's y'all's day been? Mine's been good. It was boring at work today. So boring, I started doing a little bit of delving into some AI stuff. Been fooling around with Claude. Specifically with regards to Obsidian Notes, this program that we use for our reading. I've been trying to get into that a little bit because I want to eventually use it to make plugins for this app, because mainly I hate this highlighting system. And I looked through all of the community plugins and there isn't a better one. This is the best highlighting system they have, and it's terrible. I have to highlight it like this and then go in and say it's a link and then a text, and then it does that and it'll highlight it and you can barely see it. So I don't like it. I want to make something better. I also there's a lot of stuff I want to do to this. That's because you use Copilot. Professionally, yeah. I'm working on my personal stuff. It's been working fine professionally, not necessarily professionally, but I've been kind of using it. So I've been doing information compilation in my free time at work, because unfortunately I have a good bit of free time. I wish I was busier, because then the days wouldn't go by so slowly. But I do some. We sell. We're a distributor. I'm not gonna say what we distribute. I'm not trying to dox myself, even though I doubt that would dox myself. But we have a bunch of different vendors we rep, and so what I try to do there is basically take all of the information they have on these products and compile them into the Obsidian Notes. And so that's mainly what I'm working on with Claude. And Claude has been very good for that. Because Claude, I found it's easy to format it how I want it to be. And so I've been fooling around with that a little bit, but eventually I want to use it to make plugins for Obsidian. Because these just, aren't good. And I need to fool around with Obsidian more, because there's a lot in here that's useful, like the, what is it, the canvas. This is the canvas thing. It could be very useful, because basically you can take something like this. You can take this folder, and it will just dump all of these files into it, and you can kind of organize them how you want. You know, this doesn't really do a ton for me. Like, I guess I'm not creative enough to figure out how this would be helpful for me with regards to this history that we're reading, and also the more work-related stuff. I was talking to my brother-in-law about it, because he uses Obsidian Notes at work for his because he's in management. He uses it for kind of organizing people, and so he can organize it into groups well. But he has a better mind for that type of thing. This doesn't do a whole lot for me, but you know, it's useful for other people, and I would like to figure out how I could use a canvas type of thing. I guess if I really wanted to make a timeline, I could do that, but I don't know, with specifically how we're doing it with this. This just kind of seems like the better option, just having the folders on the side. Your first century. I could figure something out if I put some time into it, but time, I'm finding, is in short supply recently. I find I don't have a ton of it. But these are just, you know, some of the developments we're making in the channel. I really want to be able to use it also, not just for Obsidian, but also for OBS. There's a couple of things I would like OBS to be able to do that I don't think it currently is able to do. I also, and hopefully if I get good at that, it'll push me to kind of develop the stream a little bit better, streamline it, you know, automate some stuff, make it easier for me, make it more interesting for everybody else watching. Might draw some more people in, but you know, the 2 people who are watching me right now, you're enough. You are enough, because I'm just Ken. That's gonna be the starting soon music for Friday, is I'm just Ken. It's gonna be every song that Ryan Gosling has ever sung. Why? Because he's literally me. I am him. He is me. But that's kind of where we're at with the development of the stream. I would like to make it more interesting. I need to figure out how to kind of get more attention to it, I guess. The issue with YouTube streaming, though, from what I've heard, because YouTube is primarily a video platform, it doesn't push streams. It's a video platform that you can also stream on, but it doesn't prioritize streams. It prioritizes videos. That's why I've been re-uploading the streams as videos. You know, the other apps that are just, the other sites that are specifically for streaming, you know, they push it better. Twitch. Rumble is kind of garbage. YouTube and Twitch are the 2 best apps, but I want nothing to do with Twitch just because of the type of people who are on Twitch. I just want nothing to do with any of that. You know, the kind of people who are just kind of scrolling through the channels on Twitch trying to find something to watch, generally speaking, aren't the type of people who would be interested in this, but also not necessarily the type of people I would want to interact with ever. So we're on YouTube, because YouTube, you can at least attract some good people. I think one thing I need to do is just post on Twitter more. I think that would be a good option, but I don't, and I have little motivation to. for whatever reason. I used to post more, but I guess I just need to find a method for figuring out what to post. Kind of make a timeline, or not necessarily a timeline, but an agenda of what I should post. And honestly, you could do that in Obsidian, because no, that's the canvas again. Because Obsidian has daily notes. Obsidian has daily notes. Okay, I completely misunderstood what the daily notes was. Yeah, you can basically also make a diary in here. Could be useful for some. Ooh, a calendar option would be interesting. Ooh. I'm thinking that could be cool. You have a calendar in Obsidian Notes, and you can plug in not just like the dates from obviously what we read but I'm thinking you could plug in big historic days like the Ides of March, March 15th. And, when you open it up on stream, what happened today? What happened today in history? I always liked those channels, or those channels on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, or the Twitter users whose whole thing was like, what happened today in history? That always interested me. But just a little rambling about my thoughts on where we're going with the stream, with the channel, But I guess we should actually get into the book. So last week we started the chapter on the Franks. It starts with the death of Clovis and him splitting up his kingdom between his sons. Their conflicts, you have it kind of split into 4 or 5 different kingdoms. They all try to work together, but that doesn't really work out. And then it goes through some of the more famous Merovingian kings, specifically Chilperic, Brunhilde and her conflict with Chilperic. You have Gregory of Tours is mentioned. He's awesome. He's the historian of the time period. One of the main primary sources we have of the Frankish time period. But then it kind of goes through the Frankish and the Merovingian specifically power, their rising to power and their falling off, and how it was the mayors of the palace, who would later become the Carolingians, who basically held power after about 614. It's at 614, not 614, more later, after Dagobert. After Dagobert, it's pretty much the mayors of the palace who hold control, and eventually it is Pippin, the short Charlemagne's father. He gets permission from the Pope to essentially usurp the throne and become king. And so he is officially crowned king of the Franks. And that's pretty much where we left off. The union of Pope and the Carolingians, especially because the Pope needed help against the Lombards. The Lombards were kind of the reigning power in Italy at the time, and they were hostile to the Pope and the remaining Byzantine areas, which the Byzantine areas in Italy had essentially been abandoned by the East, left to their own devices, because there was nothing the East could really do to help. They were dealing with their own problems. This is the rise of Islam. They're defending themselves from the Arabian conquests. So it's not necessarily, Byzantium is to blame for the situation. It kind of couldn't be helped. And so the Pope had to turn somewhere else, and he turned to the Franks. He saw the Franks as the next best thing, and eventually, obviously they were just better. Because the East falls into schism. They break with the true church, but the Franks and the Holy Roman Empire remain faithful. And so let us get into. Much has been made of the survival of the imperial idea during the centuries which elapsed between the fall of Rome and the coronation of Charlemagne. It is true that the Western Empire had its roots in the far distant past and drew naturally upon ancient precedent. Moreover, its foundation did not revolutionize the political situation in the West. It merely gave formal expression to a state of affairs already in existence. But the curious circumstances of its origin and the very considerable differences which separate it from its prototype, the old Roman Empire, were due in no small measure to the remarkable amalgam of German and Latin cultures which characterized the inhabitants of the Frankish dominions. Of this, only the most fleeting impression can be given here. A complex process of 3 centuries, varying in each district and each period, and insufficiently known to us from fragmentary records, precludes the possibility of confident generalization. In appearance, it might seem that the political and administrative organization of France was little different from that of Roman Gaul. Methods and terminology had been borrowed from Rome, and Latin was the official language. It is noticeable that in this connection that only 10% of the words in modern French are of Germanic origin. It is a Romance language. Romance as in it's a Roman language. As far as their relative legal status was concerned, only the Wehrgild distinguished the Franks from the rest of the population, while the ranks of the higher clergy as well as the financial offices were filled largely by Gallo-Romans. But if the forms remained unchanged, the spirit of these institutions was profoundly altered, not only by direct Germanic influences, but also by the new conditions brought about by the invasions. The Roman Empire had reposed on the abstract idea of the state, of laws and government equal for all, and independent of those who represented them. One was a citizen of the empire, rather than a subject of the emperor. The Frankish kingdom, on the other hand, depended for its existence on the personal relation of man to man. The power of the monarch was personal, it varied with the character of its holder. His subjects were bound to him by an oath of fidelity, a personal tie constraining them to follow him in war. A new order of nobility developed, dependent at first on the monarchy, and later gaining strength from the hereditary local influence and from the immunities bestowed on it. In the legal sphere, the personal element was equally apparent. A man was tried by the laws of the race to which he belonged, whether Gallo-Roman, Salian, Ripuarian, or Burgundian. The old German principle of the blood feud was not yet extinguished, and the pages of Gregory of Tours teem with stories of revenge. The highly specialized bureaucracy of Roman Gaul no longer existed. More primitive conditions rendered it useless. Chamberlain, seneschal, and constable surround the king, and special missions are performed by courtiers chosen without system. The districts are ruled by counts, selected by the monarch from all classes of the population, and the frontier marches are given into the hands of military dukes, who often become, as in the case of Bavaria or Thuringia, practically independent national rulers. Toll gates and ferries still paid their dues, though these had in many cases been usurped by individuals, but the elaborate system of taxation which had characterized the Roman administration was allowed to fall into disuse. There was no place for it in the scheme of a ruler who had no public services to keep up, and who regarded money as something which formed a part of a hoard, to be transformed, when possible, into gold plate or jeweled trinkets. Even the army is not a public charge. The host is gathered afresh for each campaign. It is the personal following of the king and serves at its own costs. The only permanent forces are the intrusions or royal bodyguard and a few frontier detachments. There's something in here that I seem to remember being wrong. I don't know, there's something in here that just in the back of my mind I'm thinking, I don't think that's true. No, it's not the taxation. That definitely did fall into disuse. Might be the public services. There were some maybe in the Merovingian time period there weren't really public services, but under Charlemagne there were some limited public services. I couldn't tell you which ones, but I do know that there were some. I guess it kind of depends on what he means by public services. Hospitals, schools. There were schools. Charlemagne actually attempted to, let's see, I need to stop saying Charlemagne actually made an attempt at general literacy. He wanted the young people to know how to read. And so he encouraged priests who were able to read. They had to be able to read the Bible and their breviary. The clergy was educated. The clergy had to be educated, otherwise they couldn't be clergy. So Charlemagne tried to encourage them to found schools where they could teach young people how to read. And it was successful during his time period. It was kind of limited at how successful it was, because at that point, with just how tedious it was and how difficult it was to write books, there wasn't really a point in mass literacy because there weren't books to read. There's no point in knowing how to read if there is no book to read. It wasn't until, obviously, the printing press that books became plentiful and publicly available, a lot more so than in the past. And so once the printing press was invented, you see a mass rise in literacy because there's books to read. But Charlemagne did make attempts. He did found schools. He founded universities and whatnot. And he himself was educated. He could read. He couldn't write. He couldn't write. He didn't know how to write, but he could read. Anyway. The hierarchy of the Weregild ranges society at first into conquerors and conquered, placing the Gallo-Roman beneath the lowliest Franks. This does not last long. Personal distinctions assert themselves, and while the senatorial class continues to supply bishops and officers of state, the richer Franks acquire a veneer of Roman culture. The two classes merge into one another, and the slaves, freedmen, and colony of both races follow their example. Here, too, the loyalty of individual to individual is the binding force. Bishop or abbot, court official or local government are the king's leudes, his men attached to him by a special tie and placed under his protection. The same principle is found in each pagus. Pagus? Probably pagus. The counts range themselves under the dukes, and lesser men seek the protection of the count. Already the feudal chain is forming, though still unrecognized by law, and the word leude is beginning to be superseded by the significant term vasus. This personal dependence, moreover, is reinforced and materialized by the growth of large estates. In the latter centuries of Roman rule, the smaller landowner hastens to place himself under the protection of a powerful patron, surrendering his free hold for the promise of security. Abbeys and bishoprics add field to field, for church property, once acquired, is inalienable, and over a third of France has fallen into ecclesiastical hands. Fallen into ecclesiastical hands. I see what you're saying here. Yes, don't give it to the monasteries who are going to develop your entire society. No, you can't do that. The weakness of the central power shows itself also in the misdoings of its subordinates, and in order to save themselves from the exactions of these officials, the greater landowners obtain immunities. Henceforth, the royal officers are excluded from such lands, and the rights and profits of taxation and jurisdiction devolve upon the owners. Ownership and sovereignty are in fact becoming identified, and the shadowy monarchy has thus divested itself of its few remaining powers. The transition from the local government and wide horizon of Roman days to the local grouping and restricted outlook of the Middle Ages in nearing completion. The old city life is gone. Temples and amphitheaters lie in ruins, and inside the walled towns, the empty spaces are occupied by gardens. The rural population clusters around the dwelling of the big landowner, with its church, its mill, its forge, its bakeries and stables, and all the apparatus of a self-contained existence. Sometimes the cottages of the dependents are in outlying parts of the estate, but more often they stand in streets, the ancestors of most of the villages of modern France. The houses of the rich still have their porticos and columns, their baths and fountains. Churches are rising everywhere, some of the basilican type, others cruciform, with central tower and lantern, others again constructed of wood after the Teutonic fashion. The interiors are bright with colored marble and rich with silk embroideries, but the marble has been torn from some classical edifice, and the silken hangings are of Byzantine origin. Sculpture is barbaric, and the great tradition of the Arlesian sarcophagi has finally died out. Only the craft of the metal worker flourishes. It enjoys special favor at the Meroving court, and the goldsmith's quarter is already established under the shadow of Notre Dame of Paris. Now, this is true under the Merovingians. Under Charlemagne, now before Charlemagne, you see an influx of monasteries. You see massive amounts of monasteries propping up. And in these monasteries, you have educated monks. You have very intelligent men. You have the smartest men of the generation are in these monasteries. And they're the ones who are developing the architecture. They're the ones who are developing the art. They're the ones who are developing the music. And so I saw it on Twitter earlier. You know, every once in a... It's actually pretty often that you see it. You see this person post a picture of a cathedral. A beautiful cathedral from the Middle Ages. And he'll say something like, you know, men without degrees built this. It's like, yeah, but they were still the most educated men in the world at the time. They were still the best architects of the time period. They were built by the most educated class of people. They were designed by the educated. So I get what they're saying with, modern education is terrible. I agree. But also, you're kind of downplaying how intelligent these monks were. And these people, and even the lay people. The lay people building these aren't stupid. They may not be able to read, but they are an educated people. They know their faith, and they know their duty, and they know their job. They know how to do these things. They're very good at it. Because it's one thing to design it, it's another thing to build it. And these monks were very good at designing it, and they were also very good at building it, and they were very good at teaching everybody else to build it. And so someone else had responded basically what I was saying, and that's kind of what inspired me. I'm not just stealing what this guy is saying. I have been a big proponent of the fact that the monks and the people who design these are very intelligent people. But it got me thinking about it again today, because yeah, it's a dig at the modern education system, which is, I understand. Dig at it all you want. It's terrible. You're not gonna. There's not a ton you can actually learn there unless you're going into something specialized. But it downplays the intelligence of the men in the Middle Ages. And it's obvious that they were intelligent. Just by their works you shall know them. And their works are incredible. They have dyes. Like, there's a blue dye that they use to make some of the stained glass at Chartres Cathedral. And we don't know how to replicate it today. And it's one of the most beautiful blues that you've ever seen. And they're still not a great way to replicate it, if at all, if it is possible to replicate just that exact color, that vibrance. Like these people, the monasteries are the origin of essentially modern education. Every yeah, look at the scientists. Look at the science of today. Genealogy is developed by a monk. I forget his name. What's his name? Shame on me. I'm blanking on his name. But to say that these people were uneducated is just wrong, and it shouldn't even be implied. That's kind of why I'm griping about this Twitter post. It's like, don't why are we even implying that these people weren't as smart as us nowadays? Like they obviously were the most intelligent people of their time. But that's enough of that. We still have a lot to read. The spoken tongue is changing rapidly. Little difference is to be found between the literary and the vulgar language, and under the pressure of phonetic laws, the various dialects are already in process of formation. Flumina de sanguine is used for rivers of blood, and promissum habemus for we have promised. Many German loanwords have been adopted, and the German tongue holds its own in the eastern districts. Apart from the history of Gregory of Tours, literature is practically confined to the lives of saints, which repeat for the most part with wearisome similarity the miraculous exploits of their heroes. Stock phrases and clumsy sentences succeed one another. No writer is master of his words. Knowledge of the classics is to all intents and purposes non-existent, and even theological dogma has become a sealed book to most of the Gaelic clergy. You know what I'm realizing reading this? I don't know if you recall how he was talking about the Arabs and how he was just, brimming with, nothing but praise for the advances of Islam and how they were so educated and how they stole all of this stuff from the Byzantines, but they built new stuff themselves and they developed language and they wrote so much stuff and they all read everything. That's what he's doing here. He's undermining what the Europeans were and how educated and everything about European. Because he's a little schemer. He's gonna talk up Islam, and then he's going to talk about the Franks. And granted, at this time, some of this is true. But I just find it funny how he's talking up the Arabs who are conquering and stealing all of this knowledge. And he's just talking down on the Franks. Theological dogma has become a sealed book to most of the Gaelic clergy. I'm not sure what he means by that. I don't know if he means that they don't even read the Bible, which is just wrong. Popular religion is permeated by pagan customs, and paganism itself is by no means extinct. I'm still confused about what specific time period he's talking about. Because if he's talking about, 550 AD, yeah, that's true. But if he's talking about more like 700 AD, nah, it's not. Half of this is wrong. Knowledge, let's see. Popular religion is permeated by pagan customs, and paganism itself is by no means extinct. The Celtic deities of lake and stream have still their secret worshippers, and Odin his dwelling place in the deep forests of the Ardennes. The preaching of the church, reinforced by the terror of the secular arm, will deprive the old gods of their authority, but the Black Huntsman, the Witches' Sabbath, and all... The Witches' Sabbath? It's an interesting name. And all the rout of fairies, dwarfs, and monsters will remain to haunt the imagination of the Middle Ages. Already the devil, the enemy as he is beginning to be called, a word of fear and mystery, has become prominent in popular beliefs, and religion takes on a more somber cast. What does he mean by this? Does he think the devil didn't exist? Oh, he's become more prominent. As if the devil hasn't been a prominent spot in Catholic theology, of things to avoid. The world, the flesh, and the devil. That's the big three of things to avoid. The vengeance of God or the malice of the evil one can be averted only by ritual observance. Okay, so he's just kind of getting into the typical, the Middle Ages, they were uneducated and they were superstitious and whatnot. All the usual drivel that these historians will say about the Middle Ages. Saints appear in the fields. Miracles and portents are affairs of everyday existence. True. This is true. Dreams and omens exercise men's mind, and sanctuaries and relics acquire talismanic powers to heal or hurt. You're gonna have to explain what you mean, because the delay on this, on the YouTube stream, is terrible. So I don't know what you mean by new patch drop. That could have been about something I said 5 minutes ago, and it just now hit. So I might need some help with that one. What more natural in such a world than that the Emperor Constantine, miraculously cured of his leprosy, should have turned to Christianity, bringing with him the whole of the Roman Empire. That he should straightway have bestowed on Pope Sylvester the imperial government of the West, himself retiring humbly to Byzantium. Or that St. Peter in person should be reported to be summoning the Frankish forces to the defense of his holy city. And how in such a welter of forms and institutions could the term Patricius Imperator Respublica, with their long and complicated history, hold any accurate constitutional significance for the statesmen of that time? The devil bit. Oh, okay, yeah. Still slightly confused, but I'm also not a smart man, Jenny. Yeah, no, this guy. He's kind of subversive. He's kind of subversive in how he writes this. Because like I said, you read him when he's talking about Islam, and it's nothing but praise for their culture. His chapter on the culture of Islam was longer than the two chapters prior combined. The chapter about the religion of Islam and the conquest of Islam, both of them together weren't as long as him talking about the culture of Islam. Because all it was just him talking up how great the Arabs were and how they saved the classics. It's only because of them that we have Aristotle, which is slightly true. Probably isn't even true. I used to think that. I'm not entirely sure anymore. I think it was probably just Spanish monks, and they stole it from Spanish monks after they probably murdered them. They're like, hey, we found Aristotle. See? We preserved it. Or it wasn't Spanish monks. It was probably, Byzantine monks. Yeah, no, he's a subversive little guy. This is why I don't trust the British. That's why I don't trust the British to write history. Which is why the next book we're reading is a primary source. The Thanatokon? Theitmar of Germany. Theitmar of Mersburg. It's a primary source. It is his writings on King Otto. So that should be good. Oh, great! If I was kind of cringing at how he ended that about the Franks, Him talking about the Pope, an Englishman talking about the Pope, a non-Catholic Englishman talking about the Pope. You think this is gonna be terrible? My prediction: it's gonna be terrible. You know, I don't trust the English to be historians. Their best historian is a Frenchman. Hilaire Belloc, that's a Frenchman. Their best writers aren't historians. Their most interesting writers aren't. Chesterton kind of writes history a little bit, but it's not what I would call accurate history. It's more he's kind of talking about history in some ways to prove a more philosophical point. For instance, his chapter in The Everlasting Man about the Punic Wars is phenomenal. Even if it isn't, perfectly historically accurate. It's phenomenal, though. Because he talks about Rome as almost a prefigurement of Christ, in a way. Because he talks about how close the Carthaginians were to conquering Rome. And he says Rome was dead. Rome had died. But it came back. No matter how many times it was defeated, it always came back. And even when Carthage was outside the walls and Rome was dead, Rome came back and Rome conquered. And so it's the chapter is all about kind of contrasting the old paganisms, the old types of paganism, because you have the nature worshipping pagans, which were more kind of Roman Greece, and they were more of a noble paganism, because there are worse things than worshiping nature if you don't have access to the fullness of truth. If you don't have someone telling you about Christianity, man has a natural instinct to worship, and worshiping nature is definitely a more honorable way to go about it than what the Carthaginians were, and which was devil worshippers. They were devil worshippers, and they committed all kinds of human sacrifice. They were famous for human sacrifice. And so you have Chesterton frames the Punic Wars as the final conflict between, devil worship and nature worship. As a conflict between the two. And obviously nature worship won. Carthage was completely annihilated. And Rome was allowed to spread itself throughout the entire Mediterranean, which directly leads up to the Great Peace of the time of Augustus Caesar, which some theologians I have heard say that it was the perfect time, it was the preordained time for Jesus to be born because there was peace throughout the world. Obviously not throughout the whole world, but throughout the Roman world. And that's why it was kind of that time that it was preordained that our Lord would be made flesh. And that is directly facilitated by the Romans conquering Carthage and triumphing over devil worship. And so you have Chesterton. He obviously frames it in a more philosophical way than in historical way. But Chesterton is very interesting. I do like Chesterton a lot. But we have gotten just a teeny tiny bit off topic. Kind of, It is still, we are still talking about Rome. And obviously, the Frankish Empire is Rome, is the Roman Empire. As long as there's no Greeks in the chat to disagree with me. All right, let's get this started. Chapter 13. 2 chapters left, by the way. There's this chapter, which is a long one. It's 15 pages. 15 pages about, and then 239 to page 239 to page... Oh, sorry, we have 3 chapters left. 239 to page 286. So little under 50 pages left. Yeah, Chesterton's great. Everlasting Man is a fantastic book. Everlasting Man is fantastic. We love Chesterton. Chesterton's awesome. Belloc is awesome. Tolkien is awesome. Honestly, you know, I love Lord of the Rings. I love the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and all that. But some of his lesser known writings are fantastic too. Leaf by Niggle, Nigle, fantastic short story. Basically, it's kind of a story about purgatory. Really good little story. I highly recommend some of Tolkien's other short stories. He has a translation of Beowulf that he wrote because he studied the languages that it was written in, the old Norse languages. But yeah, if you're going to read Tolkien, don't just read Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion. Look at some of his other stuff too. But anyway, chapter 13, the papacy. Papal influence in England, Germany, and France. The 2 centuries which followed the death of Gregory the Great witnessed the development, slow, uncertain, and obscure even to its authors, of papal influence in Western Europe. The personal character and prestige of Gregory had raised the See of Peter to an eminence which his successors were unable to maintain. Once his commanding authority was removed, the instability of his claims became manifest. Some of the problems presented by the barbarian kingdoms had been solved, but new and greater difficulties were making themselves felt. Arianism was a dying force. The Lombards had turned to the Catholic faith, and Spain followed their example when Recared adopted Catholicism as the national religion. The danger was now a different and more serious one. The Germanic rulers, each engaged in building up a strong central power, could not afford to dispense with any element of sovereignty. A series of national churches, owing lip service only to the papacy, would have been a blow at the very heart of Rome. Already there were ominous signs of such a thing. Clovis and his successors had brooked no interference with their ecclesiastical control, and the papal legacy at Arles remained an honorary position, not a vicegerency of the Roman pontiffs. Check this out. Dictionary. What is a gerency? Gerency is nothing. Pretty sure you just typed it wrong. Vice-regency. Although, I hope... Yeah, gerency is not a word. He spelled that wrong. Regency. But if that was a word, our dictionary plugin would have worked. Connection. He spells connection weird. But he's British. He's allowed to, I guess. All right. But the conversion of the Lombards had not put a stop to their aggression. The papacy, inter gladios Lombardorum, might well dread the advent of a Germanic kingdom of Italy. In Spain, Gregory's activities had been more fruitful. A close connection was established between Rome and the Spanish bishops, and the final century of Visigoth rule was marked by the growth of episcopal influence, which extended even to secular affairs, overshadowing the power of the monarchy. Papal rulings were irksome to the independent spirit of the Spanish Church, but a more serious blow to Catholic authority was dealt by the onset of the Islamic host. Yeah, serious blow to Catholic authority, the country becoming Muslim. But it was a very uniting time, because all of the Catholics united to kill the Muslims. The balance, however, was to be redressed from another quarter. The remnants of British Christianity had retreated before the advance of the Saxons into the western regions. They had carried the faith into Ireland, and a new center of civilization had arisen, attracting saints and scholars from other parts of Western Europe. In this strange backwater of antiquity, untouched by the Germanic invaders, the tradition of the old classical culture lingered on, attenuated and barbarized in the great monasteries. The peculiar atmosphere of this exotic world is shown by its Latin poems, in which Celtic rhythms and assonance are already perceptible, and by its exquisite manuscripts, of which the Book of Kells, with its outlandish ornaments and capitals, is an outstanding example. Kells? What is this, a Destiny 2 reference? In my history book? But the Irish Church was not content to remain in isolation. Columba spread the gospel in Scotland and the Western Isles, and Iona became a famous center of Christianity. Columban crossed to France and founded his ascetic monasteries on the Vosges. Gaul and Switzerland and Killian and Bavaria extended the influence of Hibernian ideals. There were dangers to the power of Rome in this evangelizing activity. Apart from minor, though controversial differences, such as the date of Easter and the method of tonsure, the Celtic Church, both in Ireland and in Western Britain, retained many primitive usages, and was disinclined to recognize the value of the organized hierarchy which had developed in more civilized regions, modeled on the administration of the Roman Empire. Diocese and parish, bishop and metropolitan, councils and canons, and above all, the central authority at Rome, a logical system of this kind aroused no enthusiasm among the tribal monastic communities of Ireland. And though visionary enthusiasts from the Isle of Saints might boldly rebuke kings and even brave the wrath, on occasion, of the terrible Brunhilde, statesmen like popes such as Gregory realized that the permanent influence of the Church upon lay society was only to be secured by the use of more secular weapons and by the creation of a disciplined force. The monkish orders were to be an invaluable aid in the realization of this ideal. They could be trusted to uphold the papal authority in the face of unruly bishops, who were, all too often, only powerful nobles who had extorted their office from a yielding monarch. But it was not the individualist Irish monks bidding defiance to king and bishop, and even to the Pope himself, but the Benedictines, sinking their personality in submission to their spiritual superiors, who were to be made use of in this way. The Benedictines, my goats. We love the Benedictine order. Gregory's dispatch of Augustine on his English mission was the turning point in this process, little as it may have appeared at the time. The gradual conversion of England, which occupied the greater part of the 7th century, was a series of advances and setbacks, caused partly by the varying fortunes of the kingdoms and partly by the antagonism between the Roman and Celtic churches. Canterbury remained a stronghold of Roman influence, but Mercia was a pagan realm, and Northumbria wavered between allegiance to her Kentish allies and loyalty to the Celtic preaching of Iona and Lindisfarne. The Synod of Whitby in 664, which assured the triumph of the Roman system, gave the signal for what may be called the organization of an Anglo-Latin church.
The country was parceled into bishoprics, and the minister became the effective center of each diocese. Stone churches replaced the wooden structures of former times, and the parish system, after a time, came into existence. Regular synods were instituted, and monks and priests alike were subjected to the rule of their superiors. Britain was gradually becoming a loyal province of Rome's spiritual empire. Education flourished in the great schools, and church music and ornaments were imported from overseas to enhance the splendor of Hexham and Wearmouth. Religious enthusiasm invaded the ruling class. Royal ladies entered the cloister, and kings inquired diligently for relics, or donned the pilgrim's habit and set forth to end their days in Rome. Wilfrid of York began the series of Anglo-Saxon missionaries in Germany and the Low Countries, a series culminating in the great name of Boniface. The political consequences of the work of Boniface can hardly be overestimated. The scene of his labors, for the most part, was a country which had lain outside the Roman Empire, and the conversion of its uncivilized inhabitants would have been impossible without the support of Charles Martel, whose conquests in turn owed much to the cooperation of Boniface and his followers. In 732, the Pope conferred upon Boniface the dignity of Archbishop, and the Church of Germany was organized under his leadership, as a faithful member of the Roman obedience. Bavarians and Alamans, previously converted by Irish monks, were persuaded, with the help of Frankish influence, to admit the papal superiority. The work of Boniface did not end here. At the invitation of Pippin and his brother, he proceeded to reform the Frankish Church. Abuses were put down, regular councils were arranged, and the authority of the Pope expressly recognized by the bishops. You see, Pippin is just the best. Charlemagne's dad, just the GOAT. It's a shame his son was just that much better, because he gets overshadowed. He gets overshadowed by, one of the greatest figures in history who wasn't, a priest or a monk or a bishop or, a religious. Because obviously, Charlemagne is great, but can he compare to Saint Benedict or, Saint Dominic? I don't know. Boniface had introduced Christianity and civilization into central Germany. He had facilitated the advance of Charles Martel in that region, which foreshadowed the later annexation of Charlemagne. He had helped to lay the foundations of Carolingian supremacy. He had secured the papal allegiance, the two great churches of Germany and France, and had cemented the alliance between Pope and Frankish ruler, which was destined to decide the history of Western Europe. The political forces whose coalescence resulted in the creation of the Holy Roman Empire, the extension, that is, of papal influence, and the consolidation of Carolingian power, owed no less a debt to Anglo-Saxon Christianity than did the subsequent revival of art and learning, which the tradition of Benedict Biscop and the Venerable Bede, developed by Alcuin and his followers, engendered at the court of Charlemagne. Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't know much about Philip the Macedonian, but Alexander the Great was just that massive of a figure that I'm sure Philip the Macedonian, who did great things, or, very impressive things, he just gets overshadowed. I'm sure there's plenty of figures like that. I was thinking Charles V and Philip II, but both are pretty well known. Both of those figures are pretty solidified in their ideas, or their yeah. I was going to read the next section, but the next section is just the rest of the chapter. Yeah, the next section 2 of this is just the rest of the chapter, so we're not going to read that. Should I read some of it? I don't know how much did we read today. It's 8 o'clock. Let's see, 2:42. We started 2:34. We read 8 pages. We read about 8 pages. But I don't think it would be good to get into this and then stop halfway through. Yeah, if we're going to get into the Lombards, let's just read all of the Lombards. So I guess we're going to cut it a little short today. I mean, it's been an hour, 45 minutes about of actual reading because I talked for 15 minutes at the beginning about AI and Obsidian. But on Friday, we will read the rest of the chapter. So it's pretty long. It's a pretty long rest of the chapter. 253. It's like about 11 pages. 11 pages to finish a chapter. But it'd be like that. Sometimes you just don't plan it out right. Yeah, we'll stop here for today. I don't know. I don't like starting a section like this and not finishing it. It feels awkward. Start something and then stop in the middle and then pick it up later. It's just, to me, it's just better to just save it for next time. Yeah, it is interesting stuff. Aside from what he, his tirades on how terrible the culture of the Merovingians was, which, to be fair, if he is talking about the Merovingians, I tend to agree. The Merovingians were kind of underdeveloped. We'll just put it that way. But to me, it's just how he just talks so highly of Islam and their culture in the preceding, I think, 3 chapters ago. And how he talks about all of their influence on society, and then he's talking about France. Oh, they didn't know how to read, and they stole all of their columns from the ruins of what was left behind, as if the Muslims didn't do that too. But when they did it, it was good. Hey, these Brits, man, they're kind of cringe. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Yeah, we're getting close. We're almost done with it, which is good because there are worse books out there. I will say that much. This book isn't terrible. I'm just excited about the next one because I like primary sources. Let's see. Did I already put the other book in here? I don't think I did. I should. I think I'm going to do that here after I close down stream. But I am a big fan of primary sources, and I think they're very important. But I think I've mentioned it before, but that book is... So this book ends with Charlemagne's death in 814. The next book we're reading starts with King Otto, which is there's about 100 years of time that's unaccounted for. So I'm going to try to find something to read to catch up on that 100-year time period. We'll figure it out. It'll be good. But I'm going to call it here. Yeah, y'all have a wonderful night. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any ideas, suggestions. If you're big into AI, if you know how to make these plugins and whatnot, hit me up. Let me know. But you have a wonderful night and sleep well. And if the bed bugs bite, you tell them I'm coming after them. But yeah, y'all have a wonderful night.